This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent. But this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Hey everybody, this is Makayla from A Silent War Within. You may notice that Kevin's not here with us today. That is because I'm taking the reins by myself and doing the interview together today with Jason. Jason, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Makayla. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome.
And Terry Tucker, the infamous legend, Terry Tucker, the man, the myth, the legend. Terry, you have worn so many hats, and I'm very excited to get in that. Basketball player, cancer warrior, motivational speaker, author, cop, just your life resume would astound a lot of people at how many career changes you had, if I'm being honest. But we'll get more into that into a minute. Just a little recap for everybody who hasn't seen our social media about what's going on with Kevin. Kevin had a medical emergency. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. It was a life-threatening emergency, and we are so happy to say that he has finally been discharged from the hospital. He's still going to have a lot of extensive IV antibiotics he's having to take with him, even now that he's out of the hospital, and he's having to do physical therapy really vigorously to get him back on his feet. With his schedule with physical therapy, the podcast may be just me for a little bit. Sorry to let all of you viewers down, but we'll try the best we can. We're going to stay on track. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Jason M., you were on our episode, which was one of my favorites, which was A Note from Dad. And your content just pulled my heartstrings right on my chest. I loved it. And your edit was so lovely that Angel did. Shout out to Angel, because she is the only reason we're able to keep this podcast going in
Definitely.
Kevin's absence, guys. She does her work for free, no payment, me either. And she edits all of our stuff while Kevin's gone, send me the outline. She works full-time on the ambulance, on the truck. I work full-time as a nurse at night. So we're hanging on by a thread, guys, but we're making it. So Jason, you were on episode 17 that aired on October 31st with us, and that was A Note from Dad. Kind of reintroduce yourself to all those people who haven't seen our episode, and kind of give a brief history of what your episode's about.
Yeah, so Jason Meinershagen, I live in the St. Louis metro region. I'm a husband, 33, almost 34 years now to the same woman. Father of 5, 2 adopted, 1 bonus, and 2 biological. Been a firefighter for about 32 years. 28 of those years with Central County Fire Rescue in St. Peters, Missouri. It's the second largest fire district in the state of Missouri. And for me, A Note from Dad really started in 2011 as a blog. I had a couple of close calls at work that felt like I should have probably not walked away from those intact. I either should have died or been seriously hurt. And then both of my 2 youngest sons were toddlers at the time. And I just felt like stepping outside of that and reflecting on life and the things that are truly important. I reached a point where I didn't want my kids to know who their dad was through somebody else's words. I wanted them to know who I was through my own words. And so I started the blog. The blog kind of went a little crazy coming out of the COVID years. I took some time off to deal with some mental health, some PTSD, and coming out of that, having the breakthrough that I had through that, my writing was coming back again, but my boys were teenagers, so they're not reading. They're watching YouTube shorts and Facebook reels and all that. Well, they're not on Facebook. That's an old man's game. TikToks, so I started recording little 30-second to 45-second videos for my kids and sending them to at school. And I started posting on social media, and it just really took off. And as it took off, I started connecting with more and more fathers all across the country, and young men and women all across the country who are in fatherless homes. And in connecting with them, I had an inspiration to write the book, Notes from Dad. It's a compilation of 34 authors, all of us dads, where we really just, from a dad's heart, these are the notes that we would want our kids to, and the lessons that we would want to impart upon our kids. And that's launched a coaching business. So now I'm coaching men. So it's a nonstop journey, whirlwind for me. And I'm blessed to be here. So thanks for allowing me to co-host with you today. Hopefully this goes well as our beta test, and you don't have to do this all on your own in Kevin's absence. So,
No,
but enough.
thank you for joining me.
Yeah,
I don't have
no,
to do it by myself.
this is good. I love it. So enough about me. I'm going to get into the reason we're here today. We're here to talk with Terry Tucker. Terry has worn an unbelievable number of hats. He's battled on the court as an NCAA Division I college basketball player. He stood tall as a Citadel cadet, walked the dangerous streets as an undercover narcotics investigator, and diffused high-stakes crises as a SWAT team negotiator. He's also channeled his leadership into coaching high school basketball, running his own business, and facing his toughest opponent yet as a resilient cancer warrior. After living all across the United States, Terry now calls Colorado home, where he resides with his wife, their daughter, and their beloved Wheaton Terrier, Maggie. Driven by a passion to lift others up, Terry launched his website, Motivational Check, in 2019 to empower people to break out of the ordinary and lead truly uncommon, extraordinary lives. You can find more of his inspiring work, insights, podcast episodes, and his books, 4 Truths and a Lie, and Sustainable Excellence at motivationalcheck.com. So get ready for an absolute powerhouse of a conversation. Terry, welcome to the show.
Jason, Makayla, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with both of you today.
Awesome. We appreciate you taking time to be here. You know, your police tenure, it spans a wide breadth of a scope, from patrol to undercover narcotics to relief sergeant and SWAT. That's impressive. SWAT hostage negotiator in and of itself is impressive. Terry, as a hostage negotiator, your entire job was navigating someone else's worst day by controlling the micro cadence of a conversation. How did de-escalating life or death crises on the streets of Cincinnati lay the subconscious foundation for the mental architecture that you needed when your own body became a crisis zone?
That's a great question. I mean, you're right. I mean, if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're probably having the worst day of your life. But so much of that was connecting with people on a personal level. You know, we didn't start out with, hi, I'm Officer Tucker, I'm Sergeant Tucker. It was, hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? And a lot of times it's like, you don't need to know anything. Okay, fine. What do you want me to call you? So you're trying to connect with people where they're at. And that's why hostage negotiation was so it was mentally draining, but it also was physically draining because you had to get out in the weeds with these people sometimes. And it was one of those things where a lot of times we'd be on scene, have no idea why we're there, what happened, what precipitated this. So we would ask, help me to understand what's going on. And the key word there is understand. Because if we were negotiating with a homicide suspect that just killed 3 people, we weren't going to be like, oh yeah, we totally agree that you should have done that. Understanding leads to trust, and trust leads to a point where hopefully I can get you out safely. But at the end of the day, it's really your decision on how this is going to end. And so when I got sick, when I got cancer, it was like, you know what, Terry, this is up to you. You can be the bitter, down, depressed guy, or you can say, all right, I've been given a death sentence. How do I turn that death sentence into a life sentence? And that was really, I learned that from basketball, all my years of playing basketball. I had 3 knee surgeries, all that. Your whole life, I think, comes together to whether or not you want to be a human being that wants to try to help other people. I think that's why we all, whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, a nurse, whatever it ends up being, it's, do you want to make a difference in other people's lives? It's not for the money. It's not for the fame. It's not for the glory. It's do I leave this world a better place than I got into it? So that's probably a much more long-winded answer than you wanted, but that's my answer.
No, that's a beautiful answer. It's to me, it reminds me that successful leaders are relational, not transactional. I mean, that's what I pick up on that, is that you really tried to strike that chord with developing a relationship and meeting people where they're at to understand them. I'm curious, what toll that had on your mental health? And you mentioned your basketball career. Was there a relation between the two?
I mean, somewhat, but I mean, I think what got me through, what you see as a first responder, whether it's police, fire, nurse, whatever it ends up being, you see things that you shouldn't see, that human beings should not see. You see hopelessness and helplessness. And what got me through that, and what has gotten me through 14 years of cancer, are what I call my 3 Fs, which are faith, family, and friends. Jason, when you talked about, wanting your children to understand you, and I might get emotional when I say this, I never left the house as a police officer without my young daughter giving me a hug, a kiss, or a careful daddy. And it was, if she was out of town with my wife somewhere else, it was always on the phone before it was like putting on a suit of armor with her saying that to me. It's like, okay, I've got to go work nights now. And those relationships with our kids. So I've had a very strong faith in God. And that has certainly got me through law enforcement, got me through cancer. I have a tremendous family. And really, I mean, this first responders have a higher incidence of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide, and things like that. And I've certainly seen that on the job. And there were times after the shift where it's like, hey, we're going out for a drink. Do you want to come? And I was like, look, I love you guys, but no, I don't want to come, because where I recharge my batteries is at home. I want to be with my wife and daughter. That's what it's like. Yeah, I saw this ugliness. And sometimes I would tell my wife some of the things that I saw, but not go into great detail. But it was, I want to be with you. You give me love. You give me support. You're always there for me. And that's what's gotten me through we've been married 32 years. So that's what's gotten me through 32
Congratulations.
years. So it just became grandparents last week. So
Nice.
it's amazing.
That's awesome. You have beaten the statistic. I mean, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
congratulations on being so I'm curious what your granddad name is. Are you grandpa,
Oh my
papa,
gosh.
poppy? Do you know yet?
So I have an uncle that grew up in Tennessee, and Peepaw is what they used to call him. And I hate that name. I just absolutely can't stand it. So my grandparents were Papa George and Papa Dave. So it was like, all right, Papa Terry or Papa Tuck or something like that is really what we're
Nice.
going for. So, I mean, the kid's like a week old and I'm giving her, hey, it's Papa
Yeah,
Terry here.
I
Papa
know, right?
Terry.
Yeah. At the end of the day, she's going to call you what she calls you, and you're going to love it, right?
Yeah,
It's going to come
probably,
out
hey,
something
you,
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully she doesn't replace the T sound with an F sound like my kids did.
Yes.
And when she's trying to call you Papa Tuck, I'll leave it there.
Exactly.
But whatever she calls you, that's what you're going to love, right?
Or Papa Fairy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, either one. Man. Terry, I'm curious, was there a certain event or incident that led to writing your book?
Actually, it's I'm going to try to shorten it down because it's kind of a long story. Never in my life did I ever expect to write a book, let alone two. But the first book, Sustainable Excellence, was really born out of two stories or two interactions I had. One was with I coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. And one of my former players had moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Jason, she got real quiet for a while. Then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And there is a reason. And once you find that reason, living it. So that was one conversation that I had. And then a young man reached out to me on social media and he said, what do you think are the most important things I should learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I thought about it for a while and I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know, get up early, work hard, help out. I didn't want to give him that. I wanted to try to go deeper. So I took some time, wrote some notes and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and the real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be. But as soon as I published that, I kind of felt like there was another book in me that also began with another word that started with S, and that word was significance. Sustainable excellence is a book about success. Success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for others. And so around Thanksgiving 2023, I started researching and putting together the ideas. And September 11th, great day, September 11th of last year, I released 4 Truths and a Lie. So that's kind of how they came to be.
Wow. Did you?
Your story is so inspirational, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just old, but thank you for saying that.
So how did those 2 books then transition to a career as a motivational speaker?
Yeah, I mean, it was, 2019, I start Motivational Check, COVID hits, everything shuts down. And a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, Terry, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was at all. And he explained it to me, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And I did. And I was terrible. I was horrible. I provided absolutely no value whatsoever to the audience. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. You'd ask me a question, I kind of lean in and read one of the Post-it notes. I was horrible. But then I thought, well, the first time I drove a car, I wasn't any good at it. The first time I played basketball, I wasn't any good at it. The first time I cooked a meal, I burned the water. You can't burn the water. But
Hey, real quick, as a firefighter, I can say, yes, you can burn the water. It's possible.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Well, I've never been able to burn water yet. So don't tell me how to do it, Jason, because I don't want to start a fire in the house.
No, I won't do that.
But I liked the concept and I wanted to be good at it. So I started this whole, listening to every podcast I've ever been on and coming up with stories. How do you have good stories? I mean, if I told you 4 things, you might remember 1 or 2. But if I told you 4 things and put a story to each one of them, there's a better chance you would remember those 4 things. So it was kind of, it was learning. It was making mistakes. It was going out there and it's like, man, I bombed that. I totally bombed that. And I remember my first job out of college was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. And one day I get called to the senior vice president of marketing's office. I'm all excited. I'm a trainee. I'm nobody. And I get there and he had a secretary back in those days. She hands me a binder and she said, Bill's supposed to give a speech to a group of bankers downtown at noon. It's like 11:15. It's like, if you leave right now, you should be able to make it because he can't give the speech he wants you to get. I've never seen this speech before in my life. I know nothing about what he's going to say. And I have to show up in front of a group of bankers and give this speech. And I did. And I was terrible. I bombed the heck out of that thing. And that sort of set when you speak, Terry, you'd never want to do that again. But it was a learning. I hated it, but it was a good learning process, at least for me.
Wow. I do. I'm a talker. Kevin's a talker. Jason's a talker.
Yes.
We honestly, we do this podcast as a labor of love. I have seriously considered being a motivational speaker. I was actually, when I was in high school, I did a lot of speaking competitions. And so, looking forward as my career as a nurse, I'm 32 years old. I've been a nurse for 10 years. Maybe that's in the future for me. So you're giving me some inspiration just right now, Terry. But who wants to hear a redhead from Mississippi, with a sassy redhead
who wants to hear an old man with one leg in a wheelchair? I mean, same thing.
So tell us about that. That's a good intro. So when you had your cancer diagnosis, how did that start? And then tell us about the amputations, what happened?
So I was a girls' high school basketball coach. I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot right below my 3rd toe. And initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment, went to see a podiatrist friend of mine, a foot doctor. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I said, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming, until finally he just lays it out. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. Mine has nothing. Yeah. Yeah. Has nothing to do. I don't ever remember laying out as a kid with my feet up in the air, sun in the bottom of my feet. And he said, because it's so rare, you need to go to MD Anderson. And so I did go to MD Anderson Cancer Hospital. They excised the bottom of my foot, take out all the lymph nodes in my groin, and then say, more than likely, you'll be dead in 2 years. We have nothing to offer you. And I thought, well, you gave me this death sentence. How do I turn it into a life sentence? So I spent 5 years, and Makayla, you'll probably appreciate this, 5 years taking a weekly injection of a drug called interferon. And as my oncologist said, that's not going to cure you. We're just kicking the can down the road. And I was so sick with interferon. I had terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. I lost 50 pounds, couldn't taste, a whole 9 yards. And eventually became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the ICU with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which, as you know, as a nurse, is usually
Brain
not
death.
well, yeah, with being alive. Fortunately, I survived that. But then it was, we still don't have anything for you. So it was 2018. They took off my left foot. Cancer worked its way up my leg. 2019, more surgeries. And then 2020, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, found out an undiagnosed tumor kind of in the bottom of my leg had grown large enough to break my leg, and my whole lower leg was full of cancer. So in the middle of the COVID pandemic, I'd had my leg amputated and was not allowed to have anyone with me because of COVID. They said, you'll be in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks. They sent me home after 48 hours after taking my leg off because of COVID. And we weren't ready for that. But like anything, everything else, we'll figure it out. We'll get rid of the trip hazards in the house. We'll do all the things that need to be done. So amputations are, today they're talking about taking my bladder out. So I always say I'm piecemealing myself to hell, one body part at a time. It's like,
You're trucking on.
Here's a leg, here's a bladder. There you go. I mean,
you don't have much choice. When the doctor tells you that stuff, you're like, how do we conquer the next thing? So when all this happened and you were the patient in the bed receiving this medical care and not this like active, robust basketball coach and doing all the things that you were doing at that time, law enforcement officer, whatever, how did it affect your mental state? I know it was during COVID, but just, did you feel helpless? Talk us through that.
I honestly didn't. I wasn't dead yet. It was that you'll be dead in 2 years. Well, I wasn't dead. And I kind of got to a point where this is bigger than me, and going back to it deepened, it strengthened my faith in God, because I think I'm still here based on the grace of God. He's, I have another guy who has the same kind of cancer. God's not done with us yet. And what I feel sorry for are my family. It's not easy to deal with the physical pain, but it's much easier to deal with that than it is to have your wife sitting in the parking lot while you're having your leg amputated and not, when she dropped me off, like, what should I do? I'm like, just sit in the parking lot and pray and that. So I think this is, like I said, this is just bigger than me. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying. Spend much more time focused on trying to live my life. And that's about trying to make the lives of the people I come in contact with better. That's my purpose now.
Yeah. So let me make sure I have your timeline right. So you were NCAA Division I basketball star. I'm going to say star. You were a star.
Wasn't a star. Sorry.
You were a star. You were a star. Okay. And then after that, you did the Wendy's thing, right? And then you became a law enforcement officer and was like coaching basketball at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, but after Wendy's, I was living at home helping my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of cancer. And I went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and grandmother. I was kind of a low level administrator, but I thought they did such a great job of helping us as a family and them as patients. I wanted to be part of that. So you got it all right. But
Yeah.
there was a little time where I was in hospital administration.
And then you were actively a law enforcement officer until your cancer diagnosis, right?
No, actually, I ended up having to give up. No, not give up. I mean, my wife married me when I was a suit and tie hospital administrator. And, you can imagine that conversation a
Yes.
couple years into the marriage. It's like, hey, I'd like to get into law enforcement. And she supported me with that. She's always been the primary breadwinner in the family. So when she lost her job in Cincinnati and we had to move to Houston, that was my time to support her at that point. So I got out of law enforcement, and that's when I started the school security consulting business and coach girls high school basketball.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so I have the timeline correct. So when you had your cancer diagnosis and you lost your leg and you recovered and now COVID's done, right? COVID's finally over. We're hitting 2021, 2022. What did you decide to do after that? Kind of what was your mental state in like, what's next for me?
Yeah, that was, what should I do? Where should I go? And it was okay. I started this speaking business. I started Motivational Check, which is kind of a speaking, writing business. What do I do? Where do I go now? And I spent 4.5 years after losing my leg on a clinical trial, and that left me pretty sick and beat up, but it was more assisting or helping other patients who were going through cancer, of helping them to be like, it's going to be okay. I mean, you'd sit in the waiting room waiting for your infusion therapy, and there would be somebody who would come in and, they had the deer in the headlights look and they're scared to death. And it was like, just roll over to them, kind of like being a negotiator. Hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? And then, hey, I've been here for 4 years now. These are the greatest nurses in the world. They're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. And it was patients saying, not saying, but, you could just tell, oh, this person sees me as a human being, not as a cancer patient. And I think cancer tends to isolate us, I think initially from our friends and then our family. And then I think eventually, if it goes on long enough, even from ourselves, from who we really are as human beings. So for me, it was how much goodness, how much positivity can I put back into the world with whatever time I have left?
Well, that's amazing. I'm always curious about what drives people to get into the first responder community. Transitioning from healthcare administrator to law enforcement, what did that look like? What drew you from one to the other?
Yeah. So, if you look at my resume without understanding the backstory, I'm going to tell you, it looks kind of like a Super Bowl went off and,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
banging all over the room. But there is actually a backstory. My paternal grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to live. So I had a choice. As I mentioned, when I got out of college, my dad and my grandmother were dying of cancer. I could have said, sorry, Dad, no, you're dying, but I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that backstory, my first couple jobs were in business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away and I followed my own dreams. And, I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. I know I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts and things like that. But it was one of the things in my life that I'm most proud of. I never let my dream die. I could have said, hey, I'm making good money as a hospital administrator. I'll just keep doing this. But it wasn't my passion. It wasn't my purpose. It wasn't what I was put on this world to do. And being a cop was what I was supposed to do.
And what an example that sets for your kids and now your grandkid to never give up pursuing your dream. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I'm always curious. I used to want to be a police officer. So at one point in time in my
Jason,
life,
it's not too late, I mean, come on.
well, I'm 52. I don't know. I might be there.
Hey, we had a guy 55 in our academy class. So
Did you
you're not
really?
wrong.
Wow. I don't know. I'm not much of a
Jason,
runner.
it's your time to shine.
I know, right? I'm not much of a runner. That's what drew me away from it. Drew me into fire service. It's like I don't really want to chase the bad guys. So
We don't chase people anymore. It's like,
oh,
there
that's
you
true.
go, Sam. We'll get
There
them
you
later.
go. You're right. Maybe I got a little left in me. We'll see. Through your cancer diagnosis, the amputation, and then you mentioned, possibly giving the bladder back to God. I'm curious. Like for me, I've had a couple close calls. At least one, well, two near-death experiences that really just reshaped how I move forward through that pain and through that mental struggle. I'm curious, what would you tell others who are going through similar struggles or similar pains that you and I have endured, or other people have endured? No, you and I are not unique in that. What would you tell those people to help them navigate that pain?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I would tell them you're not alone. I think when those things happen, you tend to go inwards, and you don't share it with people. I mean, I could have turned to alcohol or drugs or something, but my refuge was my family, was going home every night after the things that I saw and be like, no, I want to be with the people that I love. So, I mean, we dealt with a lot of people on SWAT that were suicidal, that they wanted to kill themselves, or they wanted us to kill them, didn't have the courage to do it themselves. And so, I always tell people, if you think somebody might be in that dark place that we've been in, ask them. If they're talking about death, if they're giving their stuff away, if they're acting out of the ordinary, they're isolating themselves, all those are indicators that they might be considering suicide. Ask them. And people always say, well, if I ask them, I'll put the idea into their mind. No, you won't. Because we would do that as negotiators.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be like, hey, Bob, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of shooting yourself with that gun? And if the answer was no, they'd be like, no, Terry, you're an idiot. Why would you even think that? Okay, fine. But I had to ask because I'm concerned about you. But if they are, you just open the door, maybe just a crack, but you just open the door. Again, going back to those patients that I would see in the waiting room. Oh my God, they see me. They see me as somebody that's hurting. They see me as somebody that needs help. So I would just tell people who are going through it, you're not alone. Reach out to somebody. There are usually in law enforcement or first responder, there are people out there that are trained to deal with that. Reach out to them. It doesn't make you, less of a man or anything. You're not tough or anything like that. The crap we see is hard for anybody to see. I don't care how strong you are. You're really more of a man by reaching out and saying, I need help. So I would just tell people to get the help you need. Don't, oh my God, I've been to too many funerals. I've had people close to me that have killed themselves with their own gun. They got found in their car by their kid or something. It's like, don't do that. Don't do that to them. Think about other people. That's hard because you're thinking about yourself. You're in your own head. You're in your own way. Get the heck out of your way. Get the treatment you need.
It's an awesome answer. And that kind of leads into the next one. For me, when you talk about being in your own head after a critical incident or a severe diagnosis like cancer, what does controlling your mind so it doesn't control you look like? That's one of your 4 truths, right? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'll actually go back to college. I get a scholarship to go to college, and the Citadel is a military college in South Carolina. And so, if you've ever been in South Carolina in August, it's, like 1,000 degrees and 1,000% humidity. You sweat in the shower. I mean, it's ridiculous. And, I've had my head shaved. I'm marching around. I've got a bad knee. I'm going to quit. I've never quit anything in my life. I am walking over to the coach's office to give up a full scholarship. And I thought, well, you know what? Let me see if I got an email. So I walk over And there in my mailbox is a letter from my father, a 7-page handwritten letter from my father. I go to the field house, I go up into the nosebleed section, I tear open the letter, and I start to read. And in 7 pages, my dad's like, get out of your way, pull your head out of your butt. You have a tremendous opportunity here. And he calls it out for me. He's like, Terry, you've called home 7 times. And not once have you asked, how your brother's doing, how your grandmother's, how's your girlfriend doing? You've never asked. You are so in your own head that you've got to get out of your own way. And he talked about when he was in the army, got sent to France for 2 years. Conscription was, everybody joined the army at that time or had to go into the service. He was in France for 2 years. He said, I was homesick at the time. He said, I'm sure you're homesick as well, but you got to get out of your way. This is a tremendous opportunity. You can do this if you want. I'm crying like a baby when I finish reading the letter. I'm like, I can't quit. I can't give up this tremendous opportunity to get a free education, to play Division I basketball, played against Michael Jordan when I was in college. I mean, I was so lucky, so blessed, but I didn't see the blessing I had in front of me. And it was really my dad that, kind of gave me some tough love. And, sometimes I have to give myself some tough love, or my wife has to give me some tough love. She's much stronger than I am. Terry, pull your head out of your butt. You need to do this. And so I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but that's my answer.
That's awesome. I love it. I think what I hear in that is the need for us to continually check in on the people in our life, right? Like I shared something recently in a video that, on the note from Dad, that no one ever checks on the tough guy, the guy who looks like he has it all together, who has the answer, who's always providing, who's consistently showing up and doing the hard work. Nobody checks on that guy, right? It's important to check on that guy. It's important to check on the people in our circle. And thank God that you have that support system in your life that holds you accountable to that. That's cool.
Yeah, I was lucky. I mean, I had no plan B. I was going to give up a full scholarship and go back to Chicago and do what? I had no plan. And, my dad set me straight. So
I'm curious, what's the next chapter in your life? What's that look like?
So I'm trying to write a screenplay based on my grandfather's, the shooting story I told you. It's much broader than that. There's a bank robbery. Teller gets shot and killed. The guy who shot my grandfather was part of the bank robbery, shoots my grandfather, goes on trial, ends up having his sister slip him a gun in the courtroom. He makes a break for it, shoots a rookie cop in the back of the courtroom.
Well, don't give the whole punchline away. We don't.
No.
But
It's huge.
It's cool.
Very broad. And
yeah.
So I'm trying to write a screenplay. I'd never written a book before. So it's like, well, let's see what happens and write a screenplay and see what happens with that.
I love
that's what's next.
That's cool.
That's really cool. And that's like, it's so amazing to see you, like, every part of your life is just evolving into something new. You're like, I didn't think I'd write a book. I didn't think I'd live from cancer. But now here I am writing a screenplay and then looking towards the next thing, even with all the other stuff, that medical stuff you could still have looming. That is like crazy beyond comprehension, that some people, and I'm going to give a little tough love to some of the people out there. Y'all's generation, you and Jason's generation, is at a completely different mental toughness than our generation. We have been placed in front of a cell phone, and we have been told that you're the greatest, best thing that's ever happened to the United States of America. And that everything you do matters. You washing the dishes matters. You putting your clothes in the closet matters. And my generation has grown up thinking that is true, when really no one gives a crap. When in reality, they don't have the mental toughness to deal with what you guys have dealt with. And so I really want to say, like, to those people out there, I hope you hear this story and just say, my life is not as bad as I think it is. The fact that my pharmacy was 2 days late refilling my antidepressant, like, I know that sucks, but you're going to get through this, and you have to keep moving forward. Don't sit in your own pity. Don't sit in your own guilt. we're going to move forward from that. Whatever happened yesterday and tomorrow's a new day. Would you agree with that, Terry? What about you,
Absolutely.
Jason?
I mean, the
Yeah,
way
for
you
me,
grow, the
go ahead.
way you get better, the way you improve is you do hard things. But
Yes.
when we don't like hard things, they hurt. Our brain tells us don't do it, but we know that. How did I get good at basketball? Shooting 1,000 shots when it was 90 degrees out and stuff like that. That's how you get good at stuff. Do hard things. And I'll give this to your audience, Makayla, because I try to do this every day of my life. Do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us and they hit all of us, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than people who never step outside their comfort zones.
100%. Everything he just said. The only thing I would add to supplement that is I heard this said before. It's not unique to me, so I'm stealing it from somebody in the internet world. If you put your problems on a board with everybody else's problems, and you randomly got assigned one, like, it's going to put into perspective that the problems you have aren't as bad as somebody else's. Like, there's a lot of people out in our lives that have worse circumstances than we do, and yet we only see, because of social media, we only see the good stuff. We only see the highlight reels. We don't see the valleys that people are traversing.
Yeah, I agree. And that does bring up another point. People on social media paint the best picture of their lives. You don't actually see the hardest times of their life, but getting to have real, genuine conversation with real people like you guys puts all that back into perspective of what's not behind a closed door or a nice facade. So that actually moves us into our next topic. Did you want to say something, Terry?
I do. There's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. And the idea is you go out and get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you sit on a bus next to somebody, question 1, and I'm just making this up. Hi, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Question 2, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? It doesn't matter what they say. They could say, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mother was a doctor, but died of breast cancer when she was 40. So I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose, their mission in life. And you're right. Social media lets us stay on the surface. Everything's great. We tap dance. Everything's fine. But what really is important, and I always say this, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was even here. And that's fine. But what I want now are those deep connections with other human beings. That's what's so important to me right now.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so that does bring me to my next question. So we see a lot of providers on this show, and we hear a lot of people, our listeners say, I'm going through a medical crisis, or I'm going through a mental emergency, or for some reason, one way or another, I'm having to step back from my first responder role. And my whole identity is poured into being a firefighter, a police officer, a nurse, an EMT, a dispatcher, right? When you had to step away from law enforcement and things like that, I know you've had a lot of career changes in your life. Why do you think it's so important not to make your job your full identity?
Yeah, because it's, we spend such a small amount of time at work, and we spend all this time. I remember this statistic, and I may mess this up, that as a parent, and Jason, maybe you have a better handle on this. As a parent, the first 18 years that you have with your children, 90% of the time you will spend with them will be over. And then the last one more year, 19 years, the rest of their life will be spent just, I'm not saying this right. The last year, the rest of the time you'll spend with them will take up roughly a year. And so
Yes.
when you have your focus on, I am somebody, it's kind of like when you're in the police academy. If you got into this job to kick ass and take names, there's going to be somebody you're going to run across who's going to be bigger, stronger, faster than you, and you're going to get hurt or killed, or somebody else is. So it was kind of like my first FTO when I started in law enforcement in California was a woman. And honestly, I think women make better cops because they're willing to talk people into handcuffs as opposed to, all right, let's go. I don't want to fight you. I'm 6'8", 230 pounds. I'll probably kick your ass, but I still don't want to fight you. I would rather talk to you and get that connection. But I mean, if you're on drugs or something like that, there's nothing I can do about it. But it, I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but
Yeah, and I saw that statistic. It was like the entire time of the span of like a lifetime you spend with your kids, when they're children and in your home, will be 90% of the time you see them. And the rest 10% will be their rest of their lives that you see
Mhm.
them. Yeah. Jason, did you have anything to add about that? You look like you were like
I, I'm,
really,
I'm, I'm, I've got a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old here at home, and I'm living that already. Like I feel it. I don't know that I heard that early enough in life. I think the only thing I heard early in life was enjoy it because it's going to go fast, right? And when you're young, you're 20, 25, 30 years old, having kids, and you're living in the moment. You're like, man, I'm in the trenches right now. I'm in the sleepless nights and the diapers and the poopy diapers and the tantrums and all the things. I just want to get to the next stage. And I found myself constantly looking for, hey, what's next? Like, let's get through this. I'm looking forward to the next stage. I'm looking forward to what's on the other side of this. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, that that shifted for me, and I found myself, man, I miss looking, and I'm looking back at the past. I missed so many opportunities because I was constantly living in the future. And now I find myself living in the back, in the past, like, oh man, looking at pictures as they pop up in memories, like, oh man, he was so cute. What happened to that kid? And so now there's a balance of like, where's the present, right? Still 17, still 19 years old. That time with them is still limited, but there's still time there. And that's the struggle for me. That's the challenge for me right now, is still finding intentional opportunities to live in the moment and be present in their life today.
I love that. But Terry, what do you do to fill your own cup?
I pray. I spend time with my family, with my friends. I mean, it's how can I make the world a better place? That's my whole purpose in life right now. And yeah, I mean, I've been on some podcasts where people are like, well, God told me. God's never told, I mean, I don't hear voices or anything like that. It's just put me in the direction where I can make a positive difference in somebody else. That's what fills up my cup. I mean, being with our granddaughter this weekend, being with our daughter and husband, and they're in the military and that, and I am so blessed to be with my family. And our daughter went to the Air Force Academy, is graduating the Air Force Academy, and I remember she called home one day, and she said, Mom and Dad, I feel so lucky to have the relationship I do with you because so many kids here hate their parents. And I was like, man, we did something right. I don't know what we did, but we did something right in our life. And I think kind of what Jason was just talking about, we made it a priority in our life. I was working nights, and it was like, if our daughter had a recital or a play or something like that, I would give up sleep to go to that. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to work on 4 hours of sleep and I'm carrying a gun and I'm making those kind of decisions. But family was number one. It was always number one. And what I did for a living, that was secondary and stuff like that. So I think it's important to what fills your cup are the things that are most important in your life.
I love that. And what would you say? This was the question that I was going to ask that I forgot if we cut that part out.
You're too young for this, Nick.
I know. I was talking to Jason. I'm an old person in a young person's body. You can ask my husband. AI. I'm like, no, no, we can't use AI. So, for someone who may be in the same situation as you were a few years ago, they're thinking about quitting, they don't see, there's anything else for them in the career that they're in. They're burned out. They're physically, emotionally, or might have a medical emergency. They have to step away from their job. What would you say to that person who feels like there's no hope and they're just going to quit?
Yeah, when I got cancer, I know I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First it was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then it was anger. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And our daughter was in high school when I was first diagnosed. And so there was sort of a pleading with God. Could you please let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school? And then I got down, I got depressed, I felt sorry for myself, but then I just came out the other end and it's like, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards that I've been dealt. I wish I could take them all in, shuffle them again and deal them, but these are the cards I've been dealt. I've got to play these cards to the best of my ability. So yeah, I know I get down. And even when I was in treatment and am in treatment now, I feel sorry for myself. But when I do that, I'm looking inward. Woe is me. Look how terrible this is. I find a really easy way to help me is to go help somebody else, is to go find somebody else, kind of like we were talking about. Jason, you said, you can always find people with problems worse than you have. Go find another human being that's having a tough day and start talking to them. All of a sudden, now you're not focused on you, you're focused on somebody else. So never think that it doesn't matter. Never think that nobody cares and stuff like that. There are people out there that care, but you can help yourself by helping somebody else.
Man, I love that. I think there's no thinking. I love it. 100%. That's for me. That's how I close every one of my social media videos is have a blessed day. Go be the blessing, because to receive the blessing is to give the blessing, right? Like, and you nailed it right on the head. I can't wrap that up any better than you did just there. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, as we wrap up this episode today, tell us, you talked a little bit about the
Your plans.
the screenplay. You talked a little bit
Yeah.
about the screenplay you're writing. Tell us a little bit more about your plans for the next couple of years. Is there anything else besides the screenplay that you're working on?
And your book, your new
And the
book,
book.
right?
Yeah, I mean, marketing the book and things like that, being a grandparent, I mean, this is all new, and got a neighbor down the road who was, asking me for pictures that I didn't have. And he's like, man, you need to up your grandparent, I'm like, I'm sorry, this is new to me. I'm trying to figure this out, as we go. I really think it's trying to get people to understand that their lives matter. I'll finish with this story. There was a nurse that I had met. All I got sports and nurse stories. So, I mean, the first time I met, she was about 25 years old when I first met her, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit where I was being infused. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you. What do you say to that? How do you respond to that guy? So I said, well, gee, I hope you decide you want to tell me. I'm sure I'd enjoy hearing it. So she's in and out for the next couple hours, finally comes in, sits down, says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, she said, I was going to get out of nursing, had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. She said, and then I met you. And she said, you come back every day. You have this terrible reaction to your medicine, but you come back, you show up every single day. And then I went back in your file when I was caring for you and read everything that you've been through. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just the way I was living my life had had such a positive influence on this young person. So anybody who's listening to us, if you think your life doesn't matter, I guarantee you there are people that are watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't think your life doesn't matter. Use your life to make other people's lives better.
That's awesome.
That
That's
just
awesome.
jerks my heartstrings out.
I was literally getting ready to ask you what's one final thought you wanted to impart upon the audience. I think that's it. I mean, unless there's something else you want to add, I think you nailed it.
That's good.
Yeah, good stuff.
Is
Go ahead.
Is there anything you'd like to ask us, Terry?
I'm always curious, why a podcast? What made you decide to do a podcast as opposed to something else?
You want me to go? I'll go. I'll tell the story. So Kevin had his own bout with anger he was a first responder. He was in dispatch. He did all these things. He was on the ambulance. And we are family. Me and Kevin are basically cousins through marriage. And I'm a nurse, and I've kind of dealt with the same things over, my time. And I've seen so many of my coworkers get out of our field because of mental health issues and suicide rates and alcoholism and getting fired from their job and addictions and poor coping mechanisms of various types. And Kevin came up with this idea to do the podcast. And I'm not a social media person. I don't do reels. I don't do anything like that. I don't have TikTok. I only just have Facebook because I'm an old woman in a young person's body. And I told Kevin, I said, I will be your co-host on the podcast, but I'm not doing TikTok, anything like that. And so he got someone, Angel, to help us do the reels and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just the co-host. But we did it to spread awareness because we feel like that mental health awareness in first responders is not talked about enough. And it is important. And there's people dying from suicide at a rate that mimics people coming back from war. And that's not okay. And so we wanted to break the stigma, have our voices heard, and just let people know when they search mental health resources for first responders. We want our podcast to be the first one up, and we talk about the hard things. We talk about medication, suicide, alcoholism, drugs. I mean, getting medications to help you, seeing a therapist. We talk about all those hard things that are kind of taboo for people who take care of others. So that's why. Thank you for asking.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Is there a common theme that you're seeing in the people that you interview in terms of mental health issues with first responders?
Yes. Burnout and PTSD. After COVID, a lot of first responders are just burnout and they can't take it anymore because we were so high stress and our anxiety and adrenaline was running constantly through COVID. And then after COVID kind of fell away, a lot of people lost their purpose and their drive for their field. And then what was your second question? About like common themes, the PTSD. So like these critical incidences that keep happening. We've interviewed a lot of people on our show that have been in episodes where they almost got shot or they had to shoot a person. We just interviewed a guy that had a book about that. Or, a nurse accidentally killed someone or things like that, like something happened to that extent. The PTSD and trying to return to work without anxiety and stress after those critical incidences. So it's just, we're trying to break the silence and, deal with those situations the best we know how, which is peer support.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that.
I think talking about the PTSD, the critical incidents, one of the things I've learned is a lot of times it's the critical incident that brings to the surface all of the what we call little T traumas. There's little T's and big T's, big trauma, little trauma. All that stacking little trauma gets stuck in that funnel and it just stays there and we think it's not changing or affecting us. It is, and our families is who's paying the price for that, unfortunately. And it's that critical incident that finally brings to surface like, oh, I got a problem. Like I'm having trouble dealing with this one incident. And once you start uncovering that, it's actually going back and you're like, oh yeah, it brings up, like for me in my situation, my big T, my critical incident brought up stuff that I'd forgotten. It was literally was like, oh man, I forgot about that little girl. Because similar to police work, you gotta go to the next call. You gotta lock it down and be like, hey, I have to be 100% for the next call. So no way we can do that is compartmentalize it and lock it down. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good. So Terry, where can we find all the resources related to Terry?
Motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. And are you on YouTube for any of your things about your motivational speaking?
So I do a weekly, and I do this for me, but I put it on YouTube. I tend to talk really fast. And so I do just a story on YouTube about all kinds of things just to get me to slow down when I talk and things like that. So yes, that's all at motivationalcheck.com. You can get all the different places that I am. And the fact that I'm even at anywhere at my age is ridiculous. But so,
I talk fast too, and people have a misconception that people from the South talk slow. That is not true. I talk a million miles a minute. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Where you can find us, A Silent War Within. You can find us at asilentwarwithin.com. We have YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere you'd like to go. And you'll see my beautiful face on Spotify and YouTube. Is there anything, Jason, you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, Terry, I appreciate the time getting to know you. Makayla, Kevin, praying for you. Kevin, Makayla, and Angel, thanks for what you do. I appreciate the opportunity to co-host. So, and Terry, genuinely, I enjoyed getting to meet you.
Likewise.
And spend some time with you.
Jason, where can I go and look at your blog and stuff like that? I think I would enjoy that.
Yeah, it's anotefromdad.com.
I got to write this down because I'm old.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Anotefromdad.com is the blog. And then pretty much any social media platform as a note from dad.
That's awesome.
Even as
I've had so much fun. This hour went by so fast, but it was just so good. The content's going to be great. So I'll finish with my, they joke with me, Terry. It's an inside joke. They say that my closer, I have sexy voice. So I'm going to do the closer in sexy voice, and I'll charge your credit card $1.99 later, okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, for joining us from A Silent War Within. Please continue to pray for Kevin and his healing journey. He's not out of the woods yet, so just please keep him in your prayers. Thank you, Angel, for everything you do for us. I hope you don't have a hard time editing this video. And I'll do my closing. Be safe, take care of your mind, and we will talk soon. Bye, guys.
See you.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.